Hello, and we're live. And I'm once again joined by my good friend, TJ Martinell, author, motorcycle enthusiast, outdoorsman, podcaster, and journalist. And actually, part of this podcast, we are going to be focusing on the latter. You may have noticed that the title of this episode is The State of Washington, state in quotes. And TJ has written a few articles about the politics going on in Washington State, the content of which is much to his chagrin, not what he'd like to be.
Yeah.
But anyway, TJ, why don't you? Hey, you're the journalist. Why don't you maybe give us some cliff notes about what you've been writing about, and then I can kind of ask you some questions about it, and we can get into that.
Well, I'll get to the point right away. Our state is moving down a path essentially where the majority of lawmakers have looked at California's current situation and said, we want to be like that too. I mean, that's pretty much what's going on, because a lot of the proposals, I'll give an example. So just today, out of the Senate Ways and Means Committee, a low carbon fuel standard bill just advanced, and it could be headed to the Senate floor or maybe headed to Senate Transportation. I'm not sure. But if that thing passes, more likely than not, our gas prices are going to go up. I need to look at this exact specifics of the bill that they finally passed. But to give a kind of a background, the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency was going to do their own regional low carbon fuel standard. And they did an analysis. This was their analysis, not some oil company doing it. They estimated that their regional policy could raise gas prices in that region by 57 cents per gallon by 2030.
And for those who don't know, who don't live in Washington, we already pay high gas prices.
Yeah, we're one of the highest state gas taxes in the country. And so there is the low carbon fuel standard. Now they're advancing a cap and trade proposal. On top of that, they just advanced yesterday a billionaire's tax that places a 1% tax on the total assets.
Oh yeah, I wasn't actually. I was good. Well, keep going because I got some questions about that billionaire's tax. Because it's kind of nebulous. Yeah. It's not. We don't know what the final form it will take yet. So, but it was kind of nebulous.
It's basically like if if your total assets or total wealth is $1 billion, then they're going to tax 1% of it. Something like that. So it's not a tax on income. It's a tax on wealth. It's a tax on property, essentially. Like if you own $1 billion worth of property in Washington State, they're going to tax it. And then on top of that, you have a whole bunch of other bills being proposed. I'm just trying to think of all the various ones that have been going on. But I think mainly is also, there's a couple of other things that really not discourage, but disconcerting. Is our state has continually gotten surplus revenue, even during the pandemic.
That was the kicker. Yeah. Almost every state, because of the pandemic and the subsequent lockdowns, most states are in dire financial trouble. Washington State actually has a surplus, and they want to raise taxes.
Yes, they want to raise taxes, and then what's going on. I think people need to understand. It's not about the money. In my humble opinion, it has absolutely nothing to do with the money. It has to do with ideology and this is just what you do. It's kind of like, I'm trying to give it, it's more akin to a religion than anything else. Like you don't ask whether or not it's important. Like, you look at the effectiveness, for example, of the low carbon fuel standard, as far as we're putting aside the issue of climate change, global warming, whatever you want to call it. It's a question of is this actually effective in reducing greenhouse gases? Well, one of the flies in the buttermilk, to use a very old term, is that Washington State has one of the lowest greenhouse gas emissions in the country. It's 1.4%. So if you're going to affect even half that, that's 0.7% of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. And then you got to look at the fact that the United States is only 15% of greenhouse gas emissions. So you're talking about a insignificant amount of environmental impacts, but the impacts to people's wallets is going to be huge on this kind of stuff.
The ROI is ridiculous.
Yeah, but it really doesn't have anything to do with that. It has to do with like the fact that like if you I look at the idea of climate change is like it's a religion, and so people when they propose stuff, that's not a debate. You don't debate the return of investment. Like this is just if you are a good climate believer, not a climate denier, you're a climate believer, you will accept these proposals. This is just what you do because this is what California did. California has its own low carbon fuel standard, and they're going to enact probably a capital gains income tax, which would be the only standalone capital gains income tax in the country. Washington State's one of the few states that doesn't have an income tax or a corporate income tax of any kind. And so there's just all this stuff going on. And it's just amazing to watch these people look at just the blessing of their situation, say, isn't it amazing we don't have a budget crisis? Instead say, we need more money. Like Washington State is currently right now getting more money than it has ever gotten ever in terms of tax revenue. And their response is, well, that's not enough. And the reality is they could get $100 billion a biennium and they would still want to raise taxes because for a lot of people, taxes are not about raising money. It's not about the money. I think Barack Obama, there was a debate during the presidential, this was years ago, back when he was running for president. And somebody brought up the concept of the Laffer curve, like the idea that if you raise tax rates too high, you actually get less revenue because
diminishing returns. Yeah.
And Barack Obama's response was very frank. He just said, well, taxes it's not just about raising money. It's about social engineering. It's about controlling people.
Controlling people. It's kind of the inverse of the argument that Margaret Thatcher used back when you remember, like, well, you don't remember, you weren't alive, you weren't even an itch in your daddy's pants, but back then, Great Britain in the 70s was in major they practically almost collapsed, and she came in and instituted all these things and reducing taxes and she kind of said what the expression was, a rising tide lifts all boats. But like a lot of people argued they would rather everybody have a lower standard of living, the rich and the poor, than even if something raises the standard of living of the poor, but it raises the standard of living more for the rich. So it wasn't like people were just jealous that other people were just doing better than them. Like they would rather see someone else fail than their own selves succeed.
Right. And this is the thing I really have a problem with the idea of when people talk about equality, it's very disingenuous. People talk about, oh, don't you believe in equality? And what most people are thinking of in an abstract sense is, oh, the idea that everyone should be treated the same. But what they really mean when people talk about equity or equality, they mean that everybody should be essentially the same in how their lives are structured. So, you look at, but only concerning, areas where whites are not to get down that road, but where whites are majority. Nobody complains about equity in the NBA or the NFL, or we don't ever hear about equity in Hollywood either. We're never going to hear about, in certain sectors or certain industries, we're never going to hear about the lack of there's not enough. You're never going to hear them say there's not enough white people in any kind of sector. So, okay, great. It's not even about equal outcomes or whatever, but the whole idea is that you can never make everyone. It's so much easier, and it's frankly practically speaking, the only way to do it. If you want to make everyone equal, you have to bring everyone down to the same common denominator. This is one of the problems with the idea of inclusion. If you bring someone in and you're like, we got to include them, your group is going to fall to the lowest common denominator. The dumbest, the stupidest, the weakest, the worst value person becomes the defining value of the group because you have to have them in there, as opposed to say, no, we don't use inclusion as a value. We say, here's our standards, and if you can't meet them, then get lost. It's, you know, like, look what happened to the military. Well, we got to be equal. Great. They lowered the standards for women.
Mm-hmm.
They lowered the standards for women because they wanted to include them. Well, great. That's not, you're talking about equality. Great. Does that raise the quality? Equality always decreases quality, because if you want quality, you want to be, you engage in exclusionary or exclusive behavior. You set standards. You say, we only want the whole idea of the cream of the cream of the crop, like the very top. You want the best, and that doesn't work if you say, oh, we want equality.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I'm really worried about, like, when I see it creep into areas like the military, which, you know, one time was sacrosanct, right? It was, you know, that you just wouldn't. Well, because, you know, the fate of everybody, like during the Cold War, for example, this stuff would just, people would find it repulsive. Like, you know, now we're going to have, you know, female transsexuals in the Navy SEALs, for God's sake. You know,
we're going to have pregnant. They're sending pregnant. I mean, that whole thing where Tucker Carlson called them out and they,
the pregnant flight suit picture. That
well, I'm just like, you know, I think we were talking about this on another episode, but this is why I was thinking about kind of, you know, I was thinking about just career years, you know, a while ago. I was thinking about career opportunities elsewhere, possibly the military, just because of all this kind of stuff. And, you know, just the benefits that are available if you're a member of the military. But then I decided, you know what? I'm not willing to tolerate this stuff. And who knows if we get involved in a war and I'm going to be forced to like subsidize the idiot, you know, female in my unit who can't lift. Like I'm basically forced to accommodate someone who, if I get shot, they're not dragging me to safety.
Yeah, there's no way some 120-pound chick is going to be able to pull you out of a burning tank. That's just not going to.
Right. It's like. I mean, we're talking about life and death situations, but I mean, honestly, man, you know, not to divert too much from the discussion of Washington State, but if I was a foreign country, I mean, the Russians have just got to be laughing at us right now.
Yeah,
like they're just sitting there like like just thinking, you know, of course the younger ones are like, how were we ever afraid of these people?
Yeah. Wait, how did we lose the Cold War again like that?
Well, of course, I don't think that they would necessarily identify ideologically with their side. And I'd be really curious to see how kind of a Russian views it, because frankly, America is more Soviet now than Russia is right now. Russia is more, I don't know what Russia is right now. I don't think it's Soviet. I think it's, you know, likely authoritarian, but
well, it's extremely nationalistic. That was how Putin brought it back from the brink of total and utter economic collapse, was an embrace of nationalism, and it worked.
Right. And so kind of going back to Washington State, they're not really, they're not concerned. Like, I'm just saying, they're not concerned about the consequences, because right now there's a massive flight from Silicon Valley. I was just reading an article about it, and they're going to different areas. Like, they're going to Austin, Texas. They're going to different states that are more amiable or accommodating to just life. I mean, I was looking at prices, housing prices in Texas. I mean, good Lord, I could buy a mansion there for the price of my house. If I sold it, I could go buy a freaking mansion over there. Now, I'm sure I'm wondering if the salaries and wages are a lot lower in consequence. Like I wouldn't be able to get the same kind of paying job that I have here over there. Okay, fair enough. But I mean, that's going to be
but also like in California, like when you move from Texas to California, your tax rate goes down so much, because in California, there's a tax on everything.
Yeah.
And in Texas, that is, you know, so they're going, like, businesses are moving there, and that's kind of forcing people to move there. And I think one of the reasons Californians prefer Texas, I think some of it is the climate too. Like, they don't want to go to a harsh climate. So that's another reason that Texas is more attractive to them than, because I think for a while they were also going to Nevada. I don't know if that's still true.
It's interesting. So the Wenatchee Airport has actually had flights for a couple of years from from there to San Francisco, because techies have been kind of coming to Wenatchee, which is for people who don't know, is in the central part of the state and a couple miles from where I live. And so Washington is probably going to, like, it's going to be seen as like, I've always, my gut, kind of perception is that a lot of leaders in Washington view us as like the younger brother of California, but they look up to California. So if California is doing something, ideologically, it's like whatever they're doing, we got to do. So if they're doing a low carbon fuel standard, we got to do a low carbon fuel standard. If they're doing a cap and trade, we got to do a cap and trade. If they've got a capital gains income tax, we need a capital gains income tax. If they've got this policy, the only thing that they'll actually never adopt that California did is their property tax law. So in California, if you bought whatever you paid for your home, that's what you pay on the taxes moving forward in perpetuity. So I know relatives who bought their homes back when housing was really cheap in California, and now their homes were worth like $1.5 million, and they're not like impressive houses or whatever. They're just regular houses, but they didn't have to pay any they weren't displaced because they didn't have to pay the property taxes like you would here. Whereas if you were living in Kirkland or something, or Bellevue, and you buy your house for $200,000, it's now worth $1 million, you're going to get displaced probably.
Yeah, they assess us. Well, it's done by county, but I think here in King, I think it's every 2 years they reassess your property value.
Yeah. And so for us, it's like it's a blessing and a curse. Like when I see my property value going up, it's like great, but at the same time, I got to pay more taxes.
Right. Yeah. And people are, well, I mean, Seattle, a lot of people were moving out of Seattle before this whole, communist takeover, Chaz Chop and, all the BLM stuff that was going on. There were people actually moving out of Seattle simply for economic reasons, because it's so expensive to live in Seattle, because primarily it's the housing prices. That's the, and I don't know what the breakdown is. You might have a better idea than that. Like what percentage of what percentage of the average family's income goes to housing, but it's a major chunk of it. So that's what was happening. So you'll see like a lot of people moving. Like the east side is very expensive. These are places like Bellevue, Kirkland, and stuff like that. The housing prices there are very, very high, but people were moving up way more north. They were going up to like places like Marysville and up there simply because they just couldn't afford the price of rent in Seattle. And it's still that way. And I'm hoping it stays that way for at least another year so I can GTFO of Seattle. As I've mentioned a million times, people are like, why haven't I moved? Why haven't I moved? Well, there's some personal reasons why I can't. But one of the reasons is I don't know where the hell, where else I can run to,
Well, I mean, so this was something I've actually been thinking about a lot, is that, if we continue on this trajectory, and I think we will, I understand the concept that there's no such thing as a irreversible trend. And frankly, some states have really stunned me in how they're able to turn things around. But, or how they just shifted in their politics. I mean, I could name a few, but we'd go on a tangent on that. But I think for me, it's more of like, okay, if we're going to go down the route, the path that California's gone, where has California gone? And in a lot of ways, we've already reached that point. I mean, California back in the day used to be the place people went because they were kind of like where Texas is now, where Los Angeles was like WASP capital of the world. Housing was cheap. Like the Bushes lived in Compton.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so it was like, I think Los Angeles was one of the whitest towns in America at the time. I can't remember exactly, like major city or something like that. And so now property values have skyrocketed. Silicon Valley, like Palo Alto, is essentially unaffordable for pretty much anyone except the super uber wealthy. And which, by the way, like where are these people coming from?
All the tech millionaires that have lived there.
Yeah, I'm like wondering, like where are all these people coming from?
I don't know.
Well, anyways, that's happened to Seattle, and that's happened to my hometown, where like the median price of a house is $1 million. So I mean, it's going to be, so like what's going to follow? Well, now the rest of the state is going to become unaffordable as well.
Yeah, I wonder though. Like, I mean, like I'm doubting. Like you will. Well, first off, where you live is beautiful because you post. By the way, the link to TJ's website is in the description. Like you pretty much kind of live in God's country because you live right in the Cascade Mountains, and it's just. I mean, it's. By the way, some pretty good photos you take.
Thanks.
And I doubt you'd be happy moving to some other places, even if you agreed with the politics, just because you'd be giving up.
Well, that's kind of what was killing me is like, okay, yeah, I could move to Texas and get a McMansion there. But I mean, I've never been to Texas. I know that it's super hot down there. I'm not a huge fan of that. I'm not a fan of our, when it's Central Washington, when it gets to be 100, but I can deal with it for the most part. So the other part of it is I just don't like having to pick up and leave because of other people's behavior. It's kind of like why the guy in Office Space, his name is Michael Bolton. He doesn't want to change his name. It's like, why should I have to change my name?
Right. Yeah.
why do I have to leave? Why do I have to go? And I think like the mountains, I love the mountains. I genuinely like the state. This is why I kind of get frustrated with people where they say, oh, well, the tax code changed. I'm going to pick up and leave. I'm going to go and move to Idaho. Well, okay, dude. Great. And I'm not judging anybody, but I'm just saying, like, you do realize they will come and follow you because they're just as rootless as you are. Mm-hmm. They'll move to Boise as well. They'll go, they'll like, you want to go hide somewhere and be left alone. They're never going to let you do that. You're going to have to go out into some place where you're very isolated. I just did a podcast on this whole thing. Is like, yeah, you can get away from them, but it's isolating. Like you're not going to be around people the way you would be if you lived in a city.
Yeah. Like well, that's actually the challenge I have, because I really need to get out of Seattle just because Seattle is an extreme. Like there's places like San Francisco, Seattle that, I get at Portland and stuff where it is this extreme leftist, where it's a cult like religion that's dangerous if you, right. I mean, I'm physically dangerous to yourself and your property just because it's just, and the quality of life is just, if you're someone who is of like-minded of myself. But I was raised a city boy. I grew up in New York City. So right. I am kind of hardwired to want to be around people and things like right. that. So I'm, because I was looking at land in central Washington and, eastern, northern Washington. But they're so remote, I'd say be happy there. I was like, yeah but, I was like, you need to be able to interact with people, and I was like, so it's this real catch-22 for me.
Well, and that's what's frustrating for me is like also I wanted to move back into suburbia, but suburbia is unaffordable for me as far as like owning a home. Like, yeah, I could go rent, and I'll respond to what Christian said. He says we can't keep fleeing forever. Also, the rural areas, frankly, sec. Yes and no. I'm in a very specific area, so my context is not exactly applicable elsewhere, but I live next to a tourist town where I call it Little Seattle now. People who live there are from Seattle, and they have Seattle values. But they're surrounded by people who are not from Seattle. But at the same time, I'm a suburban boy. I'm not a country boy. And so I have suburban, I don't want to say it's like good or bad. It's just a totally different mindset on like how you view things, like what your priorities for are, your time preferences, what you think is important, what kind of professions do you prefer? Because, as much as I admire blue collar trades guys, I just don't identify with, trust me, I envy a lot of these guys who are able to do all this cool stuff with cars, or they're mechanical. They know how to work with their hands. But I'm not part of their culture. And it's really hard to like pin down what that's about, but it really comes down to like how your brain is wired, how you process information, and how you perceive things. And if you don't share that, it's really hard to relate to other people like that. Whereas if you're a suburbanite, it's easy to identify with people who are from the same kind of mindset, and I don't have a fully developed theory for why that is, and so I don't know. It's been a challenge, kind of trying to figure out like what do I want to do, because I don't want to leave Washington. I don't want to go to Spokane. Spokane doesn't have the mountains. It also is.
That's pretty blue though. Now, see Spokane.
Downtown Spokane is Spokane Valley is actually like, that's what's kind of funny. Spokane Valley is like, it's like blood red, from what I understand. But I mean, I've kind of been trying to like write down situations like, if this happens, I feel like I need to go, like I need to leave the state. The biggest is actually, honestly, when this state of emergency ends, because if it's not over by a certain point, I just know in my heart it'll never end. It'll go like that forever.
Right. Yeah. Well, they don't want to give up my motivation. What I believe the motivation is for the government to keep this going is because it gives them so much more power, and it makes just people more subservient to keep them in a constant state of fear.
Yeah.
So
I think what was kind of one of the comforts I had, or I tried to comfort myself, and kind of like the isolation that occurs with living in a rural area, is that, I don't with this whole thing, I've never bought the lie. I've always known that this is a fake public health crisis. It's a virus with a 99% survival rate. And yet I see people when I go hiking, when I go running, when I'm just out interacting with people, they've all got masks on. They freak out when they see me and they on the trails, and they tell their little toddlers to mask up. And so I kind of just wonder, like, as much as I when I was younger, I aspired, or not aspired, but I always saw myself as just like wanting to live a very nondescript kind of what do you call it? Just not Norman Rockwell, but just be one of the regular guys, and not and just be one of the guys in the group or in the community, but not like be anything different, and not be an outlier. But yet, if you embrace reality, you're going to be an outlier. At this day and age, you're going to be an outlier.
Yeah, because everybody has. It's not that you've changed; it's that everybody else has.
Yeah, and so
most people.
Yeah, so when I see people freaking out when they see me without a mask, or when they, when I see people wearing masks in their cars,
yeah,
I'm not joking, man. I just the hysteria I've seen over this virus has been very unnerving, because it's not about the masks and it's not about the virus. It's like, what is psychologically wrong with them that they are projecting onto this whole thing? Like, what's going on? That's like, I mean, because I really think this is truly a psychological issue, and it's not even. I don't even think it's a right wing, left wing thing, because I've seen a couple of left wingers who have also like been opposed to this mask stuff, and so I don't think. And I know a bunch of right wingers who are big into the mask stuff, and so I feel like it's like there's some sort of psychological disorder. There's something that they are projecting onto this that is in them that they're not talking about, or that they haven't shown.
Well, yeah, it's kind of beyond my knowledge about, mass, group psychology and like a mass psychosis that grips hold of people. I can't explain it either. Why, people who otherwise are relatively normal and grounded in reality and empirical evidence have completely, thrown that out the window and adopted this kind of cult mentality around it. So I can't explain it. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure, decades from now, people will be writing books on this, but.
Yeah, I talked about this it's kind of sad, because it's vindicated a lot of like what I thought were paranoid beliefs I held, where I thought I genuinely thought I had paranoia. And then this whole thing happened, and it revealed, because I just concluded like most people around me have something really wrong with them. Like they're delusional. Like they have some sort of delusion that's going on. And then when I see them behaving this way with the whole virus, it's like, okay, this just confirmed that yes, most of them are at the very least lemmings. Like they just immediately accepted whatever they're told, as opposed to saying, well, wait a minute, why are we being required to wear a mask? Like, why is this such a big deal?
Well, and now the actually evidence has come out, the empirical evidence, and the statisticians have reviewed it, and they showed that the mask does not slow down the contagion. The disease is not as deadly as they said it was. If you're under 70, and the overwhelming majority of the deaths are, one person used the expression, they were quote unquote pulled forward. So people who were going to die within the next 12 months anyway, just got, you know what I mean? Their expiration date just got pulled forward several months. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I read about how like most of the people hospitalized for COVID were fat or overweight. It's like, this is where I get really, after this, I'm going to get really, when I was reading about that, I'm becoming I'm not really, how can I put it? I'm not one to pry into someone else's business, but I promise you, if somebody harassed me for not wearing a mask and they were fat, I would genuinely just get in their face and say, and I'm not going to say what I would say on this podcast because it's recorded, but like, it's basically like, you people have not only like screwed, you're sucking the money out of the healthcare system, but you're destroying my civil rights by like protecting you, your fat ass. I lose rights. So, drop like when someone's death is like a positive benefit to how can I put it?
Careful with it. Yeah. You're a public personality.
No, yeah. Well, I'm just saying, like, when someone how can I put it? Not existing anymore is net beneficial to me. There's a problem, and it's not me; it's them. And I'm not saying I'm not saying that they got to go. It's like you need to change your whatever's wrong with you. Like when you're a drain on my existence, I don't want to be lectured. Like, in fact, if anybody's gonna be lecturing anybody, I should be like, it's like we need to bring back fat shaming. We need to start harassing people who are not eating healthy. We need to start, instead, what are they doing? They're doing the whole body positivity thing.
Yeah, that's a challenge. Yeah, that's a very interesting point, because by shaming, I don't want to speak for you, but I think you mean it like shaming, like in the positive way, like doing drugs is for losers. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. Like eating Doritos. Yeah. Eating a bag of Doritos every night, or bonbons or whatever is the junk food of choice. Eating that stuff should be, discouraged, because it's not healthy, and especially with the COVID thing, it's not just affecting you, because on one level, yeah, I believe that you should be free to eat whatever the hell you want, but that doesn't mean you get to change the way other people live just because you want to eat bonbons every night instead of, or eat cookie dough, whatever it is.
Right.
But, it's like that meme. I don't know if you saw it. I don't know where I originally saw it. And there's like, a 450-pound woman on one of those the people that are too fat to walk, that
I've seen them.
And it's like this woman, it was like a cartoon where a woman's in like a Walmart, and there's another woman there, and who's fit, but they're not wearing a mask, and the woman is 450 pounds, and she's saying, "You're endangering my life by not wearing that mask." And it's like, listen, lady, I think the extra 300 pounds you're carrying around is a bigger threat to your life than whether or not someone else is wearing a mask.
I'm going to just make this observation, and I'm not going to go into detail. I think everybody can fill in the blanks. I've said this to other people, and I have no problem saying it publicly. What's going on with the public right now with COVID is not a projection, but it is a way of like dealing with how all the issues of the homosexual community and AIDS has been placed onto heterosexuals with the COVID. Like, this is how you would have, a normal society, a healthy society would have responded to AIDS, where you are obsessively controlling their behavior because it's a virus and it's a deadly disease. Instead, because if you get AIDS, you're going to die, right? Whereas with COVID, it's a 99% survival rate. Yet when these people were out infecting each other intentionally, they were held, like Freddie Mercury or whatever, the guy with Queens. He's seen as like this tragic, heroic figure. I'm like, I'm sorry, but like he died getting infected with a disease that he could have avoided. All these other guys died from a disease they could have avoided. Like they're not martyrs, but that's how they were treated, right? If I go infect somebody with COVID and they die, nobody's throwing them a parade. Nobody's making a documentary off of their life. And what's so funny, I got to keep going on this, where people have no problem hooking up with complete strangers, but then you got to mask up, right? I've seen. It's so funny when I see
the Naked Gun. Remember the movie
Naked
Gun?
Dude, it's such a. The 80s in a lot of ways is such a its farce is our reality.
Yeah. Yes. That's so true. With the AIDS thing, that's an interesting parallel. I don't think I've ever quite viewed it that way, but it's kind of spot on. Was like the 99% of people who got AIDS got it because, it was completely avoidable, right?
Right.
Stop engaging in anonymous high risk sexual behavior, and your chances of getting AIDS were, slim and none. Now I do have a friend of mine that died of AIDS. He was hemophiliac.
Right.
And he died, Little Murph, we used to call him. He died in his late 20s because he got it just, the hemophiliacs have to get regular transfusions of blood products that they, and it infected the blood supply, and that's how he got it. But that was, he died because of other people's high risk behavior. It wasn't anything he was,
right. And that's kind of the point. It's like, how did they die? And so everybody's obsessing of masking up. We need vaccines. We need to socially distance and all this other stuff. Whereas I remember when I was a kid, I'm not saying my direct community was like this, but the others was we need to stop being afraid of people with AIDS. We need to stop being afraid of they're not going to kill you. They're not going to I'm trying to give examples, but it was they were describing behavior as irrational around AIDS infected people. Here's another thing that's interesting. Do AIDS people have to have some sort of passport showing that they're infected? Because no joke, dude, I was talking to one of my barbers in my old community back in Bellevue, because I've been going to them for 30 years for haircuts. And I looked at how much they charge for the straight razor shave. And I said, well, why did it get so expensive? Or maybe they didn't even do it anymore. And they said, well, back in the 80s, everybody freaked out over AIDS. And so the insurance stuff went up or something like that. But basically,
that's the reason why there's so much now. Because it used to be in the old days, all barbershops had them, and now most don't.
Right. And so because of a handful of men's behavior, I can't go get a straight a cutthroat razor shave for a reasonable price. It's basically I might as well go buy a meal or dinner at a restaurant for that price.
Yeah, you can get a nice steak dinner.
Yeah. And so this is an example of how the unhealthy people in our society, this is where frankly the whole libertarian argument, as long as there's a government involved, a lot of libertarian arguments just don't hold up weight. But they say, well, if other people's behavior doesn't affect you. Yes, it does affect me. We had lockdowns. We're now going to get vaccine passports. I can't get a straight razor shave for less than $50 or $40 because of unhealthy people's behavior.
Yeah, well, it's funny you were talking about the barbershop thing, because I was actually having dinner with some friends who I haven't seen in ages Saturday night, and I was talking about my going to the barber now, where you have to, I don't know, at least where I went in Seattle, you have to wear a mask while you get your haircut. So you have to, when he does your right ear, you have to take your left hand, hold it over the mask, undo it around the ear, with trying to breathe through it. And then he does that. Then you put that, loop around that ear. Then you take your right hand, and then with your left hand, you undo the other loop. And it's just I was like, this is insane,
I gotta say, one of the things that I always felt as far as isolation or whatever in Washington over all this period of time and that kind of stuff, as much as it bothered me, it finally just started to occur to me, like, I cannot imagine what it would be like to be a sane, mentally healthy, sane man who is married with children, where they're expected to do the whole Zoom education stuff. They're expected to mask up everywhere they go. Because I'd have been the father who'd been like, yeah, you can tell them to go suck it. Like if I had a 5-year-old son, I'd say, son, anybody bothers you about wearing a mask, tell them to go to hell. Say, go suck it. Just get lost. Just call them a commie scum, right? Or something like just drop dead. Or say, what happens when I come within 6 feet of you? You know? But then again, they're going to get isolated. It's not just when you become.
I brought this up because the friends that I was seeing on Saturday, that the one friend, like him and his wife, they have 4 kids. The oldest of which is 14, and they live in Tacoma, Pierce County, and they've actually opened up the schools there, not in Seattle. They're still closed here, I believe.
Oh, of course.
And I kind of asked them, because we got on this topic, of course, after a couple of drinks, right? And we thought, and they're very, they don't even know what the red pill means, but they're of that mindset.
Yeah.
Like they both him and his wife came from large families. They wanted to have a large family. They've been together since they're college sweethearts. They met at the UW. And they said they inoculate the kids go to public schools, but they inoculate them against that ideology. They tell them that stuff is crazy, and it worked. I met their kids. Their kids all have their shit together.
That's good.
And it kind of gave me hope. I mean, I remember thinking I was driving, because Tacoma's a bit of a drive from where I live. And I remember driving back, and I just brought a smile to my face thinking, oh, wow, there is, highly functional people out there raising highly functional kids. And I was like, geez, maybe it's not all that bad.
And I think that there are people out there, but the problem is we are in the minority.
Yeah.
Either that, or it's like, I mean, the flip side is, I think I don't know about the Pacific Northwest in terms of this, where are people just doing what they're told, or are they doing what they're told as long as it comes from the perceived legitimate authority? Because let's say that somebody else took over let's say tomorrow somebody else took over the governorship, and he said, you know what, we're gonna let everyone decide what they want to do. We're gonna give you freedom of choice. You have a right to choose, right? We're pro-choice. What would most people do? I would imagine that most people would still. I wouldn't be surprised to see people still wearing masks 3 years from now.
Well, there would be some people, but I think a lot of people are going along to get along. That's my take on it. When you were saying if we just had another guy, I was just praying for Inslee to just disappear. I don't know how that man got reelected, but
I understand Washington. Unfortunately, I understand the mindset of people in Washington State, and here's a reality. It's a cultural thing, and it spans political and religious and ideological spans. There's just a lot of just broken people. And when I say broken, I mean, there's something just wrong with them where they have this denial of reality where you can have the most broken. For example, look at Biden. This is clearly a man who is probably wearing a diaper, who can't form a coherent sentence, who fumbles around, and people don't see that. They won't see it. They don't.
Oh yeah, but actually, people who are actually trying to pretend that Biden has some sense of.
I'm saying he could get for example, when he said that he'd been in the Senate 120 years ago. And he said it in a very matter of fact way, and everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, he was joking, guys. He was joking. You're blowing." It's like, dude, first of all, Trump. I'll give it here's where I don't buy their bull, is that Trump said things. Trump was clearly you didn't take what he said literally. He would say things.
Well, he was hyperbolic.
He was very hyperbolic, but they took what he said literally. So if he said it's going to be the greatest wall ever, they're like, is it really going to be the greatest wall? Define greatest wall.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a whole bunch of different. Whereas Biden's like, oh, I've been in the Senate for 120 years, and oh, well, he was joking. And it's like, no, he wasn't. I've seen it in real life, in my own personal life. I've seen people say things that are so removed from reality that it's worthy of the loony bin, and people listening to it say this is fine. Like like you what you thought you just heard is not what you heard. So I wouldn't be surprised if like Biden croaked on national TV and they would say he's fine. He was just acting. He was just trying to
taking a nap. It's just a nap.
Yeah, exactly. He's just taking a nap or some nonsense like that. So I just think that that's in our culture in Washington State right now, and why that is, I have some theories, but I don't
think that's not unique to Washington State, though. To be fair to the state of Washington, that is something that's
well. I mean,
it's a liberal mindset.
Yeah. Well, they also elected Patrick Bateman in California.
Bateman is the.
No, he's from American Psycho.
Patrick. Oh, the character. Okay, Patrick Bateman, American Psycho.
The guy's got the same haircut and the same like psychopath.
Oh yeah, I never read the novel. I saw the film.
I saw that. So
I didn't know. Actually, I didn't know it was based on a novel because it was a satirical take of the gluttony of the 1980s.
Yeah. So there was this one tweet where he was tweeting out about like the wildfires, and he's like, he seems so joyous that the forest burned down. He's like, come to California if you don't believe in climate change. And I think it was Terror House Magazine that retweeted, "You like Huey Lewis in the news?"
Oh yeah, Huey Lewis in the news.
When I saw that tweet, I was like spitting out my coffee and like roll it on the ground because it's like so true. Like this kind of like just sadistic psychopath behavior. And of course but unlike Washington State, he's getting recalled. Or he's got a recall movement. There's no recall movement against Inslee. I think Washington, in a lot of ways,
there was against what's her name, and then she said she wasn't going to run again. The senator, not the mayor of Seattle. Yeah, Durkin. She did. I think she had it off because she knew she was going to get recalled. So she just said she's not going to run again. I think that
she tried to straddle the fence, and it failed.
Yeah.
Like, you can't straddle the fence with that stuff. She should just come down hard and be like, yeah, we're going to have law and order. This autonomous zone is going to go away. If you don't like it, my officers have shoot to kill orders, and you're going to take it and like it because what are you going to do about it? And that would have ended it. And just like, yeah, we had to do that because we're not going to jeopardize the lives of the people in Washington State. And also, you're doing this in the middle of a quote unquote pandemic. I mean, she could have said that, but she chose not to. She said it was a summer of love. So people got raped and murdered.
Oh, yeah, the summer of love. The people
literally raped and murdered. That is classic. That is such a classic boomer comment.
Yeah.
That is such a classic. Oh, it's going to be so lovely. I'm sorry, honey.
To those of you who don't know, some people might not know this, but she literally said that on CNN.
Yes.
That summer of love comment. And I was like, and I live here, man. Trust me, it was not, I wasn't around for the summer of love either, but it was right. Like, at nighttime, that place was like Escape from New York. I mean, like in the day, like you didn't know, but, and it also like a lot of people didn't realize how bad it was because, the cameras couldn't get in there at night. They'd attack them.
Right.
So, but, there was people with cell phone videos and stuff like that. But that place was like Escape from New York. I mean, if you weren't Snake Plissken, you weren't making, and you had like right-wing ideology, you weren't making it out of there alive, I mean, it was that bad in there. I mean, with 3 people shot, 2 people killed. I don't know how many people were assaulted and raped and molested and all sorts of things. Also, all the drug dealers in Seattle went there because the cops were not allowed in, which is ridiculous. That's where the effing police station was, for Christ's sake.
Well, that's where I just don't. This is kind of why I'm glad, and I've decided to just be content with living in the rural area. I'm not going to say anything on a live thing, but trust me, that stuff would not happen in Chelan County.
Yeah,
that's not happening. Like, first of all,
why do you got to rub it in, TJ?
Well,
you got to make me feel bad.
I'm just saying, like the deputies may not be there. Somebody is going to show up, and the deputies. I don't know. I'm not saying this from like personal, nothing that's been said, but like, right. I just know the temperament of people here. They just don't have a lot of these people. I've said this before probably, but a lot of these people are kind of have been hit hard by the pandemic, but they're also economically just depressed and like they don't have time for this. Like they don't have the luxury of putting up with this nonsense.
Yeah, I just, well, I don't know whatever happened to the lawsuit that the businesses that were within the Chaz Chop area.
The city's going to settle. I promise you.
They're going to settle it?
Because if they take that to court, they are going to get raked across the coals like they've never known.
Yeah, because could you imagine the plaintiffs are all going to bring in all the cops that were ordered to stand down and testify if it was in open court?
Well, they're also going to, I mean, that could bring out even more stuff. Like
all the 911 calls being played to a jury.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm sorry. The juries are going to be like, yeah, we're going to, you're going to get bent over and you're going to wish that you'd settled. But I mean, I just don't understand the temperament of that city. Like it's a city that really just wants to destroy itself.
Yeah. God, I got to get the fuck out of here. I love talking to TJ, but it's like, I see the way you live, like because I follow you on Twitter and like the pictures you post and stuff like that, and I'm like, oh, and I live in Seattle, it's like, so I got to get out of here.
Well, I think that figuring out where you want to live and all that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, it's about figuring out where you want to live, and also if we're going to go down the route of California, you want to be in an area where you're really not affected by the breakdown of law and order, where if cops aren't going to enforce the law, fine, don't care. Just don't be there to get in the way. Just stay the hell out of the way when the law needs to get enforced. Like when vigilantes have to maintain civil order, we don't want to have you showing, because that's the problem with Seattle. Is I promise you, if a bunch of vigilantes were like clearing out the autonomous zone, I promise you the police would be deployed. And they'd be told to arrest whoever it was.
Yes.
There was like Portland's a narco tyranny. If you are a law-abiding, decent citizen and you try to defend yourself, the cops will show up and arrest you if you're trying to defend yourself from Antifa. So like people don't even understand this. Antifa is an extension of law enforcement. And as crazy that sounds, just ask yourself, if you did to the cops what Antifa does to the cops, would you get the same treatment? No, your ass would be on the sidewalk and they'd have a knee in your neck.
Oh, you'd be shot. You'd be
shot. Yeah. So don't just don't go toe to toe with these people because you're going to lose.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that's, I think we discussed about this before, and for people who are unfamiliar with the state of Washington, I think everybody just thinks of like Seattle, that because, for obvious reasons, it's a densest, but we talked about this before. Washington really is two states.
Yeah, I almost feel like, the concept of Cascadia really applies to most of or a sliver of Western Washington, a sliver of Oregon, and, parts of California. It's going to be such a weird situation where, I don't know, man. It's going to be weird moving forward. Where what frustrates me is that the leaders in Eastern Washington don't really have a vision for that part of the state. And what I mean by that is, they're trying to conserve what they have. Well, it's like, okay, but changes are coming. How are you going to respond?
They honestly don't know. You're more plugged into this than I am because you speak to, actually there was something about farmers that you wrote an article on. Could you want to give the clip notes on that?
I'm trying to think of like which article on farmers.
I think it was a podcast where you interviewed.
Oh yeah.
Because we're going to wrap up soon because I always like to keep them hungry for more. We can talk offline, but could you give the cliff notes on that? Like, or some of the other, or if not that, some of the other things that you're hearing about coming out of the legislature in Olympia.
Oh, say that last part again.
Oh no! What else? What other monstrous pieces of legislation is the state dreaming up that is probably not making it to the mainstream yet? That you're more plugged into it because that's what you do. You're a journalist, so.
I'm looking over some of the stuff. I'd say there's an environmental justice bill that's moving forward. That's a huge thing, and I think that's kind of the main issue is that, and a couple of the other things that we talked about, where they're going to. The Silicon Valley is going to go somewhere else. It is in a current exodus. It's going on a migration, and it's not going to come to Washington State because Washington State right now is sending a signal that is going down a path that in creating an environment that they are leaving right now. That's just the reality. And so it's like, I don't know if we're going to end up in the exact same situation as California, but it just bothers me to see how the state, like, I don't know. This is the curse of like what could have been. Like we could have things could have been done differently. We could have
looked how do I say it? The lawmakers could have seen California as a warning sign, like what not to be, and they literally did 180. They did the opposite. They were like, "How can we try to make us more like California?"
Yeah, they look at California and say, "We want to be more like that. We want to be less affordable. We want to be more. We want to have more taxes." It's a very, yeah. I mean, I guess the takeaway is like, if you got property in Washington State, hold on to it, or, you can always move, but just make sure you've got property because the property values in the state are going to skyrocket. They may go down in other states, and people are saying, oh, well, this can't go on forever. I've been covering real estate in Washington State for 6 years. It's not got stopped. Like the bidding war stuff just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And now it's spread to my part of the state.
Yeah, actually, your part is on fire right now.
Yeah. So I mean, I may one day I may decide if the right lines get crossed, it's like, okay, I'm going to sell, do a bidding war, get as much money as I can, and then go to some other state. That may happen. I'm hoping not, but. Yeah,
well, you're young enough where that might happen. I think to paraphrase Aaron Cleary, I just need them to keep the lights on for another 20, 25 years, and then I won't give a shit anymore. I'll be like Biden. I won't know where I am or who I am. But before we wrap up, I'd like it if you could tell us if you're working your most recent works of fiction, or if you want, or you could also plug your journalism as well. By the way, the link to TJ's main website is in the description. So you can just click on that, and that has that is linked to all social media and where you can purchase his books on Amazon.
Yeah, you might actually. Speaking of which, I wrote this book 8 years ago called The Stringers. That
I read it.
Yeah, and what's funny is like it portrayed Seattle as being this kind of like apocalyptic waste zone, and Bellevue was like the new Seattle, and that's kind of in a little ways that's what's going on. But then it had an earthquake, so there was like a geographic stuff added to it. And there's also Men Who Walk Alone. If you like Humphrey Bogart, you'll like Men Who Walk Alone. I think John can attest to that as well. And then there's also The Pilgrim's Digress. That's through Terror House Magazine, Terror House Press. They've got another book of mine that's coming out at the end of this year. If you like The Legend of Zelda, you're going to love that book because I wrote it basically kind of inspired by that. And
what's the title of that one?
It's called The Legend of Ferenya, The Twilight Kingdom.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more of like I would probably describe it more as like a young adult fiction book because I kind of wrote it for that age group. But it's if you're an adult and you like Zelda, you'll enjoy it as well. And then I'm currently working on a book which is kind of a blend of film noir and science fiction. So if you like Humphrey Bogart, if you like The Maltese Falcon and Casablanca and Star Wars, you'll enjoy this book.
TJ specifically writes books just for me. That's all, you seem to touch on all the things I like when you write. And you didn't mention the Song of Wolfgar, but
the Song of Wolfgar, yeah. Get the you can get the physical copy if you like kind of like reading poetry in a physical form, but also get the audiobook. Jack Napier did a fantastic job of that. If you liked Beowulf, or you just like old epic adventures, or you just don't like reading about all the cucked loser heroes and idiots and converged, you don't like the transgendered LGBTQ 21 flavors of ice cream Captain America, you can read about Wolfgar.
Yeah, it's very well. TJ's a good author. Very extreme. I can't wait till someone puts that in the review. Yeah, no. Anyway, so check out TJ's website, and right there you'll find the links to all his stuff. He's a great guy. He does amazing things, and a man of high caliber. That's why I keep having him on. Anyway, everybody in the chat, thanks for all the comments. And if you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe. And if you got any questions, you can put them in there too. I'll try to address them. Or if there's something else you'd like to hear me talk about, or a person you'd like to have me interview, put it down there as well. I really appreciate that. So anyway, thank you, everybody. Thanks again, TJ. Always a pleasure having you on. And everybody, peace out and take care.